Are there any specific questions about the legalities of this or how it's going to be? Because I was asking about Ken Van Dyke, because I think he's the only one on the propagator list who has gone ahead and signed up with you guys, right?
He did.
Ken did.
Yep. And
So
then,
that he can propagate on farm for his own use.
yep, and he did that, he completed it, and then he terminated the license agreement. So he doesn't have that annual fee, so he paid what he needed to, and yeah.
Was there a question? All right, I will go on to the other part of what I had envisioned for this, and it doesn't have to take an hour if we get out of here early. It's great if we cover things, but I did want to give us some open-ended room here because usually when Chad gives a presentation, we see about 50 slides and lots of information, and it's fantastic. I've been doing the on-farm trials now for a couple of years. There's a sheet in the back with what blackberries we presently have in the ground. And I think we're at a real turning point here with what we have available on our genetic resources of our breeding program here and actually raspberries too. And what our goals have been and what we have a possibility for. Because I can see possibilities here, and this is me, so, but we've got product diversification possibilities with stuff that's coming out of the program now, where for as long as I've been involved with this industry, we've been trying to get basically a thornless Merriam, cold-hardy Merriam. And number one, I guess the first question is, have we accomplished the goal of having economic Merriam replacements that are thornless, winter-hardy items? And Chad can talk to that, but what do you guys think? Do you think the new stuff we've got out here meets those objectives?
I think it could still use a little bit of improvement. It needs more checking on for harvestable and stuff, but I think we've made drastic improvements. I think it's coming close to being that.
Isn't it just too new right now to really make that kind of an evaluation? I mean, it's
certainly,
what, two winners, one cold, and this one's mild?
I would agree with, and I'm sure Chad would too, but I agree with what you're saying, Tom, but what I think I'm seeing is, what I'd like to see us get on is more of a 5 or 10 year time frame. I think the genetic resources are there, that we've shown enough promise to not just concentrate on those particular qualities. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that's exactly a good point to be made. Is, you know, we've got a lot of thornless, high-quality material that's still rocketing through the system that we're going to be testing. And, you know, but what other things should we start paying more attention to that maybe we haven't in the past? I mean, it's really been, it's not that we don't pay attention to a lot of things, but, you know, it has certainly been, you know, thornless is really high. Trying to get good quality is really high. It's got to be machine harvestable. It's got to be good yielding, and all those things have been critical. But is, you know, I guess I start thinking about other things as we move earlier and later. You know, that helps fresh market people, and earlier maybe we get away from SWD problems. We can move, you know, a week or two earlier without having bud break be a week or two earlier. Yeah, I would think that would be a good thing. I would think, well, I know there's at least one grower in this room who machine harvests for fresh market. I think it'd be really good if we could have more options for doing that with some of the varieties we have. Because labor is not going to get less of an issue. I guess, go ahead.
I kind of follow up on that because I think maybe you missed it, but we had a clicker survey at the beginning of the workshop, and one of the questions was, as far as like fruit quality goes, you know, what are some of the characteristics that we're looking for in a plant? And one of them that kind of surprised me was plant architecture, and thinking about plant architecture in terms of that helping maybe labor issues or things like that. You know, does your program, as are you looking to?
Number 3 down here,
Okay.
4. I mean, like I said, it's a question of plan architecture. And, I talked about it at a couple commission meetings probably 4 or 5 years ago. But we've sort of gone at that 2 ways. First of all, when I started talking about plan architecture, a lot of people, there's sort of a little bit of a split. I think in the long run, everybody would like a more upright plan because that's easier to maintain, or easier to train. But for the people who are winter lifters, or whatever you want to call that, you may be putting yourself in a more winter injury problem with having the canes up in the air. Plus, if you have the canes up in the air, that means when a machine's going over them, they're hitting all those priming canes, and you also have all that foliage in the way as the fruit's dropping through. So it's not that that may be fine to have that problem, but that is more of an issue with more erect plant. 1, cane injury from the plates, and 2, fruit going through the, tell me when I'm wrong, you guys know better than I, this is my thinking. And also just more of an issue of fruit getting caught up in your hand. Having said that, we started crossing with Easter material years ago, and that's where you start seeing some of our, we talked about our ones that are 3/4 Eastern material and 1/4 Western. We're releasing 2 that basically have a not totem, that'd be amazing, triple crown plan architecture, so they're much more upright and erect, and yet they have the long conical fruit. That gets towards that architecture thing, but the problem with all that Eastern material is late, so most of our stuff ends up being more of a late July, August thing, so we got SWD's problem, so it's not perfect. But the other thing we've done is started selecting for, within our regular old, what we would call trailing germplasm, for ones that are more upright. So you get this, me talking about these erect trailing blackberry plants, which makes no sense. But we've gone that way too. And I assume that's a good thing, but I'd love for anybody to tell me, yeah, keep doing that, or, well, that's a stupid idea.
I mean, the other thing from my point of view is with the on-farm trials, which is basically supported by the commission, it's a link between this. And what we need to do is not just have Chad out there guessing at what we might want, but be able to kind of complete this loop. So he's hearing from us, because the potential for what you've got in that program is pretty amazing at this point. So that he's going to head off, and we've got Wild Treasure out there, which is this little tiny, great tasting berry that's machine harvestable, but it doesn't have a market. It might be great in bakery products and things, and it's sat there, and he's probably going to drop the small fruited stuff because there's an interest. But all he can do, correct me if I'm wrong, but he's basically coming out there and laying it on the table and seeing if anyone bites at it. And it'd be a lot better if we could make this active. You guys say what you want. You guys know the markets, you know your products, so what do you want to see? What kind of things could you use?
You're right, Chad, the late season stuff kills us with the spotted wing disopals. It doesn't look like it's going to change soon, so the earlier we can get it to come on, the better. Most of the Arkansas stuff, that stuff is late, where it's a problem.
Yeah, as far as architecture, brittle canes. I don't have much experience at all, or hardly any experience with Columbia Star. What kind of cane structure is that, as far as limber?
I don't know,
They're not brittle at all, they tie up.
Not
just
like a black diamond?
No, not at all. They tie up like a Marion, they don't have to work.
They're all skinnier also.
Yeah, I guess 2707-1, which is really nice, one's out at some grower fields. But it can tell me he thought it was 10 times more brittle than black diamond. So I didn't think that was an unfortunate thing to hear back, but we'll see if that's really true, given another year. But luckily, he's only got a row. He doesn't have acres. But I am aware of the brittleness. I also aware, though, this is one of the things you learn over time, is you guys are a lot smarter than all of us. Combined with, we only have them at one location or a few locations. This is what we're trying to get away from with grower more intensive grower trials. But you know, when black diamond came out, there were a lot of people who had problems with brittleness. And it's not like it has gone away, but the growers who have been with black diamond for 10 years, they don't train it in the middle of winter when it's most brittle. They train it when, if they can get a really nice hot days in August, that's when they're going to train it, because they lose some canes, but it more than makes up for it with yield. And so it turns out that brittle canes is not that you can ignore it, it's just a matter of it's a learning curve on learning how to grow something. Now, if it really is 2707, it really is 10 times more brittle than black diamond, that's a problem. And that's just not going to be overcome. I also see, I guess what I think about is one of the hardest ones to breed for, and this is what, once again, these trials help with, and anytime we get on our grower sites, is, we know now after a little over 10 years with black diamond that it is definitely more reliable year in, year out than Marion. It's going to produce a crop with, if you get hard winters, it's more likely to come through. You can get high. I mean, I'm not even getting into how high a yield you can get, but just that winter adaptation. And Columbia Storm, we don't know. It hasn't been out there that much. And I think it's better than Marion. I'm not sure it's as good as black diamond, but it's only going to be. I wish we push these things out quick enough that we unfortunately don't have all the information we want. Unfortunately, you don't get all the information you want for 10 years, or some period of time that's longer than we all want. But I'm assuming, that's a big thing for breeding, is trying to get the ones that are going to be reliable and productive year after year.
Brian, you've tried quite a few of these on-farm trials and other things. What are you seeing any qualities that are not coming through, or what's your take on this whole program at this point? You've stuck with a lot of the regular stuff, and I think you guys are going more thornless Marion probably at this point.
We've got a little bit of thornless Marion now. We'll have it up on the wire for the first time this year, so I can't really tell you as far as winter hardiness, if it's going to be better than the thorny Marion, I don't know. But it's just one of those things that it's just going to take time to see it, And the older the plantings, are they going to weaken out faster and not be as strong? So I'd be more interested in you continuing to work on an earlier season and probably erect, semi-erect type of a deal to help us get away from some of the labor costs. I think there's some opportunity possibly there. So that'd be my recommendation, Chad.
How about diseases? I go down to California and listen to the blackberry guys down there, and downy mildew is a huge problem. Seldom, it's an occasional problem up here, and now their new big thing, now they have a problem with fumigating, is Fusarium. It's not a big blackberry problem. Do you have any particular disease problems on blackberries that you're...
Rust.
But why is it bothering you? Because you lose yield, or you think it's taking all your foliage off, or is it actually going further?
I don't know. I've seen a lot of it on the black diamond this past year. Don't know really yield. That's hard to say. I couldn't compare it. I didn't have isolation, or we treated, but it was persistent.
Red berry might, but sulfur pretty much takes care of that, but that's a concern. All the blackberries, black diamond.
You got it on black diamond too?
Yeah.
I haven't seen it on black diamond. I usually think of it as being a huge problem on any of the semi-erect.
What about fruit mold? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
So Mark had a question.
You brought up California. California's breeding primal canes coming fast. What do you got in the pipeline for primal canes?
I'm glad you brought that up. I think it's a good discussion. So, when the first Arkansas prime cane fruiters came out, it was prime Jim and prime Jan. They were released in large parts because how well they did in Oregon. Because they were horrible in Arkansas. But still, even in Oregon, they really start fruiting around last week of August, first week of September. And John Clark came to see them out here in the middle of October, or 4th of October. He'll tell you the exact day. I think it's the 4th of October that God descended from heaven to talk to him or something out in our field at North Willamette Station. But anyways, then you hit Primer 45, which is by far the biggest one anywhere being grown. And that one's 2 weeks later. So here in Oregon, it starts almost really the middle of September. So then the question is, we've been breeding with them because we've had their material around and we've crossed with our material. We've got some selections, probably have 3 or 4 selections in trial each year going into trial. But if I'm not getting fruit until at earliest the third week of August, and more likely the 1st of September, it seems like it's mostly a market, going to be a market for those of you who are willing to put up tunnels and have tunnels till Thanksgiving. And I'm not saying people can't make a lot of money off that, but the question is, how much time should I spend breeding for that sliver of the market? Because I'm not really, the plant geek in me loves to look at that material. The practical side of me, though, wonders whether that's really the best use of my time because of the amount of people it's going to impact.
So is Mother Nature given any tweak in its newness to go early? Is there any genetic freak that John's throwing out that you should have had in the back of a car driving out here?
Well, unfortunately, that's the big problem with all this stuff. I mean, he would like it to be earlier. So not yet. I mean, we're still working on that. And I guess I'm hoping that by selecting in Oregon with our conditions, that we'll get some stuff. And we there's a couple selections we made 2 years ago that are pretty cool looking. But we're going to also run into the problem, or not the problem, the challenge of, John Clark he and I have the biggest blackberry programs in the world. And John's probably, at this point, at least 50%, if not 2/3, primocane fruiting in the number of seedlings he runs through his program. Whereas I'm 95% not primocane fruiting. And so is it in the best interest for our growers for me to screw around with that? Or is it better to see what comes out of his program that's adapted up here and go that way? Now the reality of the way we've gone is, as Mary will tell you, I'm just enough of a plant geek, I can't let go of it. And I do want to see us selecting under our environmental conditions, we could get something earlier.
I mean, the only way you can go is earlier. And you just need that freak abnormal thing that John has, that he pitched out somewhere that you can kind of try. That's my suggestion. Just tell him that you want anything that, if you can kind of genetically move it forward.
Yeah, and that's our hope. We also have another couple different sources of primocane fruiting. There's we call our Lebanese blackberry, but it's this thing that's probably a little bit like Tupi in that it put in a climate where it probably doesn't need any chilling to flower and break bud and flower. And this thing, it was scary on the farm because it's so prolific in the fall. Unfortunately, the fruit are about 2 grams. These little teeny things, smaller than blueberries. But we have used that in crosses to try to see if we get that characteristic. And those were earlier. And so we are trying that. Because certainly, there's got a lot of interest. If you could get a primocane fruiter that would fruit as early as the earliest primocane fruiting red raspberries, starting in late July, you still have the SWD problem, but if we could get away with a much cheaper management, it is a real interesting thing. You got a question?
Well, really the main disease is botrytis, fruit mold. What can you do for that on breeding?
Breed for ripening right in the middle of July.
Firmness?
Yeah, firmness is always a big thing. Firmer they are, they seem to have less botrytis problems, less storage drop problems than fresh. I think firmness is the thing that's going to get a hold of another level over the next 10 years. It's just, they're all better, but even better.
What about plant architecture? Like, do plants which hold their fruit on the outside, under that canopy?
You would think so. I mean, you certainly think that the more ideal plant architecture for any sort of fruit disease or disease is black diamond, with everything so exposed. Of course, we all know the downside of that is we get heat. That's what gets burned up too. So there's all of these balances of this is the challenge of any new variety, is figuring out what's the good things and bad things about them. I guess that's the other thing that we are trying to be more aware of is heat tolerance. It seems like it may always be hard to breed for what our big problem is, which is those days where it goes from nothing to scorching and back to nothing. That really burn us up. If it just slowly creeps up into the 90s, we don't seem to get much problem. when it goes from 83 to 98, we get in trouble. So I'm not sure you agree with that. We should try and select away from things that are very successful.
You know, the other thing that came up this morning on the survey a lot too, I was asking about organic production. And again, I think, I'm not sure what you do with that on the breeding side, because again, you get, it's mainly, I think, botrytis and SWD that are, well, SWD that would be the big problem. But I don't know if you've ever addressed that or thought about it.
I mean, there are people who are trying to look at it. The general feeling, especially on our raspberries, you guys heard me say this before, is that in a parental block where you have 100 different varieties, you'll see ones that SWD prefers over others. But as soon as you put a half acre of that one variety out there, they don't care. They're going to eat it. They're going to go after it. It's been now there is actually a program. North Carolina's looking into that. We'll see what comes out of that.
SWD resistance or
For SWD.
I think it's a real long shot.
It's hard to see how it would work, but until you get something gross. Maybe you had the skin of an apple on a drupal. That would work, but it wouldn't eat that. And the other one I guess I look at is a lot of times when people talk about organic, less so on blackberries, but certainly on blueberries and strawberries, it's dealing with getting enough nitrogen in the plant. It's more so the pests. So we usually don't have that problem with blackbirds, but they have plenty. It's not that they don't like nitrogen, but they're much more vigorous than the rest of them.
It is black diamond, I think, that needs a lot less nitrogen.
Yeah, and it's even smaller plants. So
Yeah.
Can you repeat that, Tom? You said black diamond needs.
Yeah, I wish Bernadine was here. She's going to work on it, but it takes less nitrogen than Marion and some of the others. You don't see any difference, and I don't want to speak too much to it because I don't have the research in front of me, but I think we can use some real, if you got black diamond and some of these others, coming up with more variety-specific recommendations can do a whole lot. I mean, a lot of our mold is caused by overly soft fruit, too much nitrogen at times, but that's hard to narrow down without knowing exactly what you're doing and losing yields.
The other thing too is I think we've got a lot of potential on increased yield. I mean, anytime anybody does a bud count for how many buds actually break on blackberry, Bernie did those years ago, she was doing a lot of winter entry studies. Marion only breaks, I don't know what it is, 60% or something of the buds. And if you could get a blackberry that would break closer to 100% of its buds, you in theory could increase your yield substantially. We've never been able to figure it out how to make that happen. We do know that anybody who has ever grown Chester, not that that's not a very different plant material, but Chester, without working that hard, some growers would get 15 tons the acre. And why can't we get 15 tons per acre? And now I know there's some growers with black diamond who've gotten close to 15 tons and will regularly get 12 tons. But it'd be really nice if without working that hard, you get 15, and if you worked real hard, you get 20.
If we could figure out the mechanical pruning time too, I mean, it would just make things more uniform. It's like Frank was showing with the apple varieties or fields, especially when they're hand pruned and trained, you lose a lot of yield to bad trimmers. You see so many broken canes out there and broken stuff. If there was the plant architecture was strong enough and we had the mechanics to actually do that mechanically, I think it would also increase yields just by consistency and uniformity.
The other thing we looked at as far as architecture that we haven't spent a lot of time on because it hasn't been very satisfying with. We've got blackberries that are mature this big. It's a little bit like that raspberry shortcake thing they sell for the ornamental trade, but for blackberries. And you wonder, what could you do with that? Could you have a blackberry that you just mowed off right after harvest, you grew enough of it in the fall, and maybe you harvested with a combine instead of, I don't know. It's hard to figure, but
Mulberry one possibility of doing it.
yeah, Or, but if you could get them so you're planting the rows 4 feet apart, and I don't know, maybe it's, unfortunately, most of the time with those dwarf habits, when you get the genetics for the dwarf, it's really hard to get other good things. And it's even been a problem for raspberry shortcake was developed by the New Zealand breeding program. That's the one that Fall Creek sells to a lot of nurseries. And I know the breeder there, they've been trying to have a much higher quality raspberry shortcake. And it's, that dwarf trait is just hard work. And you can call.
The other thing that Ken was bringing up in the hall
Yeah.
was,
Yeah, we forgot that, Ken.
yeah, I don't know where he went, he should be in this discussion, but seedlessness.
Yeah.
He was saying,
I don't think it's going to happen. I will tell you where they did it. I mean, they did it in red raspberry. They did a GMO red raspberry 20 years ago. That was a seedless red raspberry. But you can just imagine, I mean, we lost all that structure. I don't even know how they picked this thing. But I'd love for them how to do it, but I just don't think.
there's nothing in the wild or anything in the genetics that you can see that would encourage seedlessness or smaller seeds or.
Well, we do have, I mean, the seed thing, we always claim, and I feel it's true, that the Western material is so much better than the Eastern material. And it's mostly, so Marion and Black Diamond versus Chester and Triple Crown. And I think it's because, they did some studies years ago, that the seeds aren't that much different in size. The ones in our Western blackberries are flatter, so they slide between your teeth, eat more easily, or crunch more easily, plus they're a little softer. So they may be length and width as big as the Eastern seeds, so they don't crunch your teeth like Eastern does. And so we do notice those things. So when we're selecting, there's a lot of things we select passively against. We may not be actively out there putting different diseases on our plants, but certainly when we see a plant covered with disease, we don't usually keep it out there. And we do that for a lot of trees, yeah.
Yeah, no problem about taking the seeds out of there, there's just most of the logic acid that.
Yeah.
You take the seeds out, I mean, it feels like most of your nutraceutical value of that berry, so I mean.
Well, that's one thing that the commission's doing right now, which Chad knows that, but a lot of people in the room might, is a lot of varieties that Chad's did were testing for having tested to see what's in them. Maybe one of them is that would help stirs has got so much stuff that's better for you. Chad's working on that now. We've got a new super fruit, we don't even know it, we've already developed. Our fingers crossed.
When we spend most of our time when we talk about varieties on veterinarian processing window, and I think it's fair, I mean, it's the main part of our market. But geez, I just see so many other potential things. Like, I don't know if an improved poison. I mean, poison is still a good part of our market. Whether we could expand on that with thornless hide in something that's a lot firmer, poison type, or I don't know. You do have a lot of fresh market stuff that's coming out that I know you're going to name, and I think for this part of the industry that can be useful because you're going to get royalties back in, and some of that stuff can fund the main processing stuff that we're doing. But it just seems like within the next 5 or 10 years that there are opportunities for us to develop other market niches for our blackberries.
I'd like to think so. I mean, the playing devil could have happened on the other side, though, is where's the acreage gone over the last 30 years?
Yeah, well, why is it on that?
Yeah, the yield's so low, that's
Yeah,
his argument,